Marvel Snap has gone and slaughtered the sacred cow. Find out what's going on as I hereby invite everyone to join me on my adventures through Marvel Snap. Hey everybody, it's Annabelle. So we got a brand new patch that just came out today with some buffs, some nerfs, and an interesting game change. And the first one that we have up on our nerf hit list is Hellcow. Hellcow has gotten a big hit where it went from a 4-6 to a 4-7, which seems like a buff, but it also lost the ability to discard one of its cards. This is the nerf that I've been asking for Hellcow for a while. This is a card that is still powerful as a 4-7, even though Hella wasn't performing the strongest, the Moo Hella. It felt bad, and this card basically made it feel bad. It's still a 4-7 with upside. You can say it's not upside, but because of the fact that it has no negative behind it, because it's a may, not a must, it basically says at the end of the game, pull a card from your deck onto the battlefield if you have Hella. If you look at a lot of the 4-7s, we're going to look at some of the 4-7s here real quick. If you look at a power spike here, the ones that are other 4-7s, you've got your Symbiote Spider-Man, which is also pretty good. It has no downside, but you also have stuff like Staggeron. And you also have Proxima Midnight, so you've got some cards that it's still in the realm with, you know. Man-Thing has downsides, so it's right around the same level as Spider-Man, as the Symbiote Spider-Man, I should say, where it's all upside because, again, you don't have to activate it. It has no downside. If it made you discard a card at the end of the game, no matter what, but then you could activate it to have that happen beforehand, that could be kind of interesting for Hellcow, where it's like, at the end of the game, you have to discard a card, but if you activate, you do it beforehand. So maybe on turn 6, you have to discard before you play the Hella. That could be interesting. Because what you do is you just wait till the end of the game, you activate Hellcow as the last interaction, you play down the Hella, and you get one card out of your hand. I'm glad this change happened. I almost wish that they would relook at Hella because of this fact, and I almost am upset because it kind of seems that, like, one of the reasons I kind of did like Moo Hella was the fact that it was a very Series 3 new player friendly deck. Every card in it was Series 3, other than the Blink, and you didn't have to play the Blink, you could get around that. And it feels weird that they're punishing older cards, where this was one of the few cards that really brought back this card for a while. I mean, it is an annoying deck to play against, but it's also a deck that a lot of people had access to and were starting to climb with and do well with, even though it wasn't that great on the power level and it wasn't that great on the win level, because a lot of people would just leave. And it seems like it was already starting to self-govern itself, which seems like a weird sentence to say, but it seemed like ever since the Scream stuff come around, I didn't see that much of the Hella around there. And with the clog that's existing, it was kind of like a nice rock, paper, scissors thing. It's interesting that that happened. Next up on our nerf list, we've got the White Widow. Not the White Widow herself, but the actual Widow's Kiss. The Widow's Kiss has changed from being a 0-0 that had the ongoing power of -3 on your opponent's side, and if you filled up that location, it become a 0-0 again or turn off the effect, to now being a 0 -4 on its own, and if you fill up the location, it will destroy itself. The Widow's Kiss will destroy itself. This is kind of interesting because it basically means this card can no longer clog a lane. If you play this on the Bar Sinister, where it used to throw all 4 of the Widow's Kisses across the side, it won't work on that anymore. Also won't work on the Throne Room anymore. It makes it so that Clog has a harder time existing, and that's kind of interesting and kind of shows where Secondary wants to be with Clog as a archetype as a whole, where they kind of want it to exist and be a way that you could do this, but they want it to be a very hard archetype to do stuff with, because when you lose a game because you couldn't play anywhere, that feels a lot different than when you lose a game because you played poorly. And having nowhere to play was bad. And there was too many ways with Kate Bishop and White Widow and Green Goblin and even Titania to really stop one way from functioning. And if you could lose one lane, you basically can't win the game anymore. Next up we have on the Nerf list is Viper. Viper is gotten 1 point shaved off of her. Viper keeps going back from a 3-4 to a 3-5 to a 3-4 to a 3-5. This is one of those weird cards where if they had half points, I could honestly see Viper being a 4.5 or 4.5. When you can't use half numbers, when you only can use whole numbers, it's really hard to find a balance for her. Because at a 3-5, she really didn't seem busted per se. But at a 3-4, she doesn't really seem good. And I know it's only one power point, but that really does change on her. And it's like the 3-4 doesn't feel right, but the 3-5 didn't feel broken. And I almost wish they would have done the Widow's Kiss, saw where that landed, and then looked back at Viper. I wouldn't be surprised if Viper got her 1 point back. Next, we have to talk about a game change. This is a game change to Kingpin, to Scream, and to the Fisk Tower. Going forward, no card will get affected by Kingpin, Scream, or Fisk Tower if it isn't revealed. This is a great change to how the game works because it makes it consistent. So now going forward, it's basically a hard rule that if it is not revealed on the board, it will not be affected on the board. This is how a lot of destroy cards worked. This is how a lot of move cards worked. This is great for the game. It makes it super consistent. It makes it super easy to understand. You don't have to think about, oh, I lost this game because it moved over there and then got the PowerPoint off. It just is. If it's not revealed, it's not affected. It's a simple rule. No reveal, no effect. Right. Because of that change, we have a weird kind of nerf / buff that happened here, which is Scream. Scream got changed from a 2-2 to a 2-3. Part of the reason that she got this change is because of that move change, where it will no longer affect unrevealed cards. It will still work because the card moved. But it won't work because of the fact that it goes into the Kingpin lane. A card still moves that game. That round, I should say. So it moving wasn't what was hurting it. It was it going into lanes that didn't make sense. So now when something moves, it's not affected because it wasn't there. But then it will not work on Scream anymore. So she kind of loses that Juggernaut power that existed. But if it is showing up, it will still work on her. So it's kind of a nerf, kind of a buff to her. She does get that 1 point of power, but now she's got a little bit more of a weird fighting position to have because there's a lot of things that she was doing where she'd get that power by moving something unrevealed. Mostly with the Juggernaut that happened, so that's why she got that 1 point of power. Next change that we have is Grandmaster. Grandmaster got changed from a 2-2 to a 2-3. This is an interesting buff to Grandmaster because Grandmaster is starting to really come into its own. I think a lot of people are starting to realize how good small on-reveal effects are and early on-reveal effects are to really push you to later games. I've seen this be used a couple times with the Master Mode to really get effectiveness, especially I've seen this used with doing the Master Mode and then doing the Misery on top of this to really clog your opponent's hand with a whole bunch of the Sentinels. This 1 point of power is almost where Grandmaster should have started a long time ago. It's sad that we had to go this long to get him to this point, and I would like to see what happens going forward if this is enough to make Grandmaster a master of the game finally. Alright, next one that we have getting a little bit of a buff is Emperor Hulkling. Emperor Hulkling went from a 6'11 to a 6'12. I know they said in the patch notes that they don't want this to be a 5. Please just let this be a 5. Everybody wants this to be a 5. I would rather this be a 5'4, a 5'6, a 5'8 even with low power, just to get that turnout earlier. It being a 6'12 doesn't really help you out a lot. Most stuff that is 6 already has 12 power, so you're not really getting a spike out of that. If you were to do this, to have this be where it wants to go, I'd almost rather this be a 6'14, 6'16, something where it's like, oh, you're going really heavy on that. But that seems wrong too, because that's such a huge power spike at the end that you can just throw it out for 6. That's why I want this to be at a 5. Again, shave points off this. Take this down to a 5'10, a 5'8, a 5'9 even. And let it have the ability to catch that early 6 works. Because everything, almost every single card that's a 6 drop seems so much better as a 5 drop. Next up we have Okoye. Okoye has gotten changed from a 2-2 to a 2-3. Honestly, she wasn't seen play as a 2-2. I doubt her getting 1 point is going to be a 2-3. It's nice that this is going to be in the new player quote-unquote pool, but I'm actually getting tired of them using that as their excuse for stuff. At this point, Okoye could get +2, and I don't think it would break the game. I really want them to get rid of that new player mentality. You don't spend that long of a time in new player. I want them to have a new player experience, but it doesn't need to be that long, and it isn't that long. I think if you really try your hardest, you're a new player for basically like a month at that. Is it worth having everybody not have cards that they can play 6 years down the road, 7 years down the road for 1 month of learning? And even if you did learn on Okoye, you learn Okoye and you're like, oh man, Okoye is good. As soon as you enter into that first pool 3, you realize that Okoye has no power, and she's really hard to trigger. If you don't get her on that too, you are in trouble. Last up, the card that we have to talk about that got the biggest buff slash nerf slash I don't know what they're doing with this card, is Zabu. We all knew this was going to get a buff. It's coming in a cache. I think it's this Tuesday where it's coming up, and that's why they buffed it. And I'm getting tired of that too. The fact is Zabu should be a Series 3 card. It's that simple. Zabu's been out for too long. It's been around for too long. It should be a Series 3. The fact is they didn't care that Zabu was horrible, and everybody knew that Zabu was horrible ever since they turned it from on-reveal, so from ongoing to on-reveal, I should say. They just have left this card in the works. Nobody played it. Nobody wanted it. And the only reason they took a look at it is to sell this card in the cache next week. And honestly, it's a really good card in the cache next week. This card is a broken Zabu. This is probably more broken than the ongoing version of this. Because if you get this right on 2, all the 4s in your deck are now 3s. That's broken. You don't have to wait a turn for it. You don't have to get it anymore. You don't have to strategize. They just are. Now, there is some downside of it that you're talking cards in your deck, not cards in your hand. And that was kind of the buff of Zabu was that you knew what you had and you could just plant down Zabu to get the turn. But a lot of people were playing Zabu right on two, and they didn't care what was in their hand, what was in their deck. There is a deck that exists out there that I kind of think is going to be wicked with this, where basically you just throw almost all 4-drops in your hand. And you just hope to get Zabu right on 2, you get the Zabu right on 2, and then, sorry, on 1 I should say, I don't know why I said 2. Get this card in your open hand, you play down the Zabu right off the bat, and then you skip turn 2, on turn 3 you play your 4-drop card, on turn 4 you play a 4-drop card, turn 5 you play a 4-drop card, and turn 6 you play 2 4-drop cards. Now, that might not be possible because you have to draw the card with that. You don't ever have the turn where you have 2 4-drops in your hand, unless you missed one of your ones otherwhere around the way. But just to have 2 4-drops come down, you're talking about a 20-point spike that you could have come down at the very last turn, and that's with just playing Cold Obsidian and Crossbones. That's it. That is scary for Zabu to have. That is scary for Zabu to do. But it annoys me that they did this just to sell a card, just to make you want to get this card for the Spotlight Cache. And if this buff is too good, they can change it down the road once the sale has ended, once the sale is over. If in 2 patches they're like, ooh, we kind of overestimated how well Zabu was going to be with this power, you're going to buy the Zabu and be like, yeah, I got this. And then in 2-3 patches, it could be changed again. It's just something that they need to look at. Stop putting the same cards in Spotlight Caches over and over and over again. Start taking some of these cards that you know are staple cards and start putting them into Series 3. That's what's going to grow the game. Anyways, those are all the nerfs, all the buffs, all the changes. I want to thank you all so much for watching. And as always, remember, play for fun.